Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Access Arabic. Today we continue with our Tajweed workshop series. We're currently up to module number 4, which is the rules of Ra. So this continues on from our videos on full and light mouth letters. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. Amma ba'd. So we begin with module number 4, the rules of Ra. It's easy to say that. Lesson number 4, the rules of Ra. It rhymes. So we begin with the theory. We are continuing from our previous videos on heavy and light letters. But do note the rules of Ra are at face value probably the trickiest to remember, theoretically. But don't worry, as Allah Almighty has made His glorious speech easy to understand and remember. And this is what He says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. So I advise you watch and study this video properly and repeat it a number of times. Study it attentively, and if you have any questions, then of course feel free to ask, inshallah. You have the Telegram chat, you've got the comment section, you can email me, get in touch with me anyhow, and inshallah I will help you. So first and foremost, we will look at the simple rules, and this does apply to the vast majority of cases, in all honesty. If a Ra has a fatha or a dhamma on it, then it's full mouth, it's heavy, and if a Ra has a kasra, it's light. So the default rule is if Ra has fatha or dhamma, it's full mouth, Ra, Ru. If it's kasra, it's light, Ri. Ra, Ru, Ri. Ra, Ru, Ri. Ra, Ru, Ri. Ri, Ra, Ru. Ri, Ra, Ru. Ra, Ri, Ru. Fatha, dhamma, heavy, kasra, light. Okay, so if Ra is mutaharrik, if it has a fatha or a dhamma, it's full mouth. If it has a kasra, it's light. Fantastic. But what about if Ra is sakina? What if Ra doesn't have a fatha? What if it doesn't have a kasra or a dhamma? Well, if Ra has a sukoon, then we look at the letter before it. So if the letter before, so if the haraka before Ra is fatha or dhamma, then it's heavy. If the haraka before is kasra, then it's light. So if Ra has a fatha or a dhamma, then it's full. If it has a kasra, it's light. If Ra has a sukoon on it, if Ra is sakina, then we look at the letter before. If the letter before has a fatha or a dhamma, then the Ra is full. If the letter before has a kasra, then the Ra is light. So let's have a look. Here we have Ra, and the Ra is sakina. So that means we look at the haraka before. The haraka before is a fatha. So this means that the Ra will be full mouth. Aru. Now let's look at the next example. We have a Ra sakina. As you can see, we have a sukoon here. So that means we must look at the haraka before. We must look at the vowel before. The vowel before is a dhamma. So that means Ra is full. So in these two instances, Ra is full mouth. So we have ur, 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 not ul, ul. No, it's ur, aru, ur, not al, ul. It's heavy, not light. And in this third example, we have a Ra. It has a sukoon on it. It is sakina. So that means we look at the letter before. And the letter before has a kasra. So this means the Ra will be light. So it is iz, not iru. It's not iru, iru. No, it's iz, iz, iz. It is light. The same applies for bar, bor, biz. Taur, tur, tiz. So you should try this with the rest of the letters as well. So just to remind you. So to remind you, Ra with a fatha or a dhamma is full mouth. Ra with a kasra is light. But whenever Ra is sakina, whenever it has a sukoon, then we look at the letter before. And if the letter before has fatha or dhamma, then the Ra will be full mouth. If the letter before has a kasra, then the Ra will be light mouth. Okay, so we've covered if Ra has a fatha or a dhamma on it, then the Ra will be full. If Ra has a kasra, then it will be light. And then we've also mentioned if Ra has a sakina on it, then we look at the letter before that. If that letter before has fatha or dhamma, then the Ra will be full. If the letter before has kasra, then the Ra will be light. But what if the letter before Ra is also sakina? This is a third possible scenario. In this instance, we follow the standard rule. If Ra is sakina and the letter before ra has a sukoon, then we look at the letter before it, as you know. And then if that letter has a fatha or dhamma, then the ra will be full. If it has a kasra, the ra will be light. This instance will only really apply when you are stopping on a word. As I've said, the rules of ra may appear complicated at face value, but really they are simple. So if we take a look at this example here, ashrun. So we know ashrun, this ra has got 2 dhammas on it, so it is full mouth, ashrun. But if we were stopping on it, that means ra is sakina, it now has a sukoon, so we must look at the letter beforehand. Okay, that is also sakina, so we look at the letter before that. Oh look, we have a fatha here, so that means this ra will be full mouth. As I've stated, this situation only really applies when you are stopping on the ra, when we're doing waqf, when you're stopping. So before we move on to the exceptions, let's have a recap of what we've learnt so far. So let's take the ra. If ra has a fatha or a dhamma, then it is full mouth ra, ru. If ra has a kasra, then it is light, it is empty mouth. If ra has a sukoon on it, if it is sakin, then we look at the letter before. If the letter before has fatha or dhamma, then the ra is full. If the letter before has a kasra, then the ra is light. So if ra is sakina, we look at the letter before. But if the letter before ra is also sakina, then we look at the letter before that. Once again, if that has a fatha or a dhamma on it, then the ra is full. If it has a kasra, then the ra is light. And we've covered that this only really applies when you're stopping on a word. For example, we covered the word ashrun. So this would be full mouth, ashrun, because the ra has 2 dhammas, but if we're stopping on it, we're making it sakin. So we look at the letter before. The letter before is also sakina, so we look at the letter before that, and it's a fatha, so we make it full. If it was a kasra, we would have made it light. If it was dhamma, we would have made it full. Now let's move on to the exceptions to the rules of ra. So if ra is preceded by hamzatul wasl, then the ra will be heavy. It will always be heavy in this instance. Do note that depending on where your mushaf was printed, a hamzatul wasl will either have a little sad on the top, or it will not have any harakat on it at all, as we will see now in the examples. So let's take a closer look. In some scripts, depending on where your mushaf was printed, hamzatul wasl will be like this. You will have the hamza here, and then you have a little sad on top. Or in some other prints, it may just be like this, just a hamza on itself with no harakat on it at all, no fatha, no dhamma, no kasra, no sukoon, nothing at all, just a hamza with no harakat on it at all. Whenever we have a ra sakina preceded by hamzatul wasl, then the ra will always be full mouth. So if we take a look at this example here, we have a ra sakina, it has a sukoon on it, and before it is a hamzatul wasl. So in this instance, the ra will be full regardless. So it will be, so even though before we have a kasra, it doesn't matter, the ra will be full mouth. So it will be read as رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا, رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا, رَبِّ, not رَبِّذ. Even if we were just starting from here, it will be irhamhuma, not idhamhuma. Irhamhuma, irhamhuma. The ra is full mouth because it is preceded by a hamzatul wasl. Likewise, in the second example is from Surah Al-Fajr. It will be read as irji'i, irji'i, not izji'i. This is because we have a ra sakina, and before it is hamzatul wasl. Whenever we have ra sakina preceded by hamzatul wasl, the ra will be full mouth regardless. Likewise, in these next examples, we have amirtabu. We have ra sakina preceded by hamzatul wasl, so it will be amirtabu, 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 not amirtabu. Next example is alladhi irtada, because we have ra sakina preceded by hamzatul wasl, so it will be full mouth regardless. Alladhi irtada, not alladhi irtada. This is an example from another print. So we have a ra sakina here preceded by hamzatul wasl. This print is very popular in South Asia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, and other nearby areas as well, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bhutan, and Maldives, and other South Asian countries. In this type of print, hamzatul wasl is shown by the absence of any haraka on the hamza at all. So this is the example that I mentioned before from Surah Al-Fajr. It's ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية. ارجعي, not irji'i, because we have ra sakina preceded by hamzatul wasl, and that brings us to exception number 2. If ra sakina is preceded by the letter ya, then it will be light. As we can see in the 2 examples below, we have the word khayr, not khayr. So we have here khayrun, khayrun. So of course khayrun, this is tanween. We have tanween of dhamma. So in this instance, ra is full. But if we are stopping on it, then we will make the ra sakina, right? Then in that instance, now we have a ra sakina preceded by the letter ya. So it will now be light. Khayr, 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 not khayr. It will be khayr, khayr, not khayr. Likewise, in this second example, we have qadirun, qadirun. This is full mouth because it has dhamma. But if we stop on it, we make it sakina. And now we have ra sakina preceded by ya, so we will stop as qadir. It will be light. Qadir, qadir. And this brings us to exception number 3. These 5 words, by looking at them, you may think they should be light mouth. This is because we have ra sakina here. That means we should look at the letter beforehand. And the letter before has a kasra. And we've covered whenever ra is sakina, we look at the letter before. If the letter before has a kasra, then we read the ra as light. And we have the same in all of the examples. We have ra sakina preceded by kasra. Likewise, in the third one, we have ra sakina preceded by a kasra. In qirtas, we have ra sakina preceded by a kasra. And in wa'il sada, we have ra sakina preceded by kasra. So based on the general rule, these should be light mouth. However, these 5 words are an exception because the ra sakina is followed by a full mouth letter within the same word. The sad here is full mouth. The sad here is full mouth. The qaf here is full mouth. The ta here is full mouth, and the sad here is full mouth. So because of this reason, because the ra sakina is followed by a full mouth letter within the same word, the ra will be full. So it will be la bil mirsad, la bil mirsad, not la bil mirsad. Likewise, it will be mirsada, not mirsada. Thirdly, it will be firqah, firqah, not fidqah. Fourth example, qirtas, qirtas, not qirtas. And in the fifth example, wa irsada, not wa irsada. This is because the ra sakina is followed by a full mouth letter within the same word. So whenever a ra sakina is followed by a full mouth letter within the same word, the ra will be full mouth as well. So we'll recite the first 5 ayat of Surah Al-Fajr in order to recap what we've covered so far in the rules of ra. So we have أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والفجر. I made the ra full mouth. If we were to continue reading and say والفجر, then in that instance it will be light because there's a kasra here. But because I stopped, I made it sakina. That means I must look at the letter before The letter before is also sakina, so I look at the letter before that, and we have a fatha, so I made the ra full mouth. وَالْفَجْرُ وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرُ. I made the ra full mouth because we have two kasras, which would mean it's light, but I stopped on it, I made it sakina. Letter beforehand also is sakina, but the letter before that has a fatha, so I made it full. If I was to continue, it would be light mouth. For example, وَالْفَجْرِ وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ وَالشَّفْعِ وَالْوَتْرِ. Next we have وَالشَّفْعِ وَالْوَتْرِ. Once again the ra with the kasra, so we look at the letter before, which is sakina. The letter before that has a fatha, so we make the ra full mouth. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرِ. You'll notice I made this light mouth. That is because this is another exception, which we will cover once we've finished this example. هَلْ فِي ذَلِكَ قَسَمٌ لِذِي حِجْرٍ. Notice I made it light. If we were continuing, it would have been light anyway. حِجْرٍ, it has two kasras. Whenever ra has kasra, it's light. But because I stopped on it, I've made it sakina. That means I look at the haraka before. The letter before is also sakina, so I look at the letter before, and that is a kasra, so we make it light. هَلْ فِي ذَلِكَ قَسَمٌ لِذِي حِجْرٍ. Once again, if we were stopping on all the ayats, we will read it as أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر. But if we were to continue and connect the ayat, it would be والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر. In this slide we can see an excellent table summarizing the rules of Ra. It's found in Maha Rashid's Reach the Goal via Tajweed rules. I genuinely recommend everyone downloads this book because it is fantastic. It was also the first Tajweed book I studied with my Ustad. So I will leave it on the screen, and it provides a fantastic summary for everything we've learned so far. So the ruling of Ra being heavy or light depends on the haraka on the Ra. If the haraka on the Ra is a fatha or a dhamma, then the Ra will be heavy. If the haraka on the Ra is a kasra, then the Ra will be light. If the Ra has a sukoon on it, then we look at the letter beforehand. If the letter beforehand has fatha or dhamma, then it will be heavy. If it has a kasra, then it will be light, except for these 5 exceptions we mentioned previously. Plus the word firq is a very special word. This can be read heavy. The Ra in firq can be read heavy or light. So we can say firq or firq. We can do either firq or firq. We can read it as either. You have a choice, heavy or light. So if the Ra is sakina, we look at the letter beforehand. If the letter beforehand is Hamzatul Wasl, then we've covered that Ra will always be full mouth. Likewise, if the letter before is Ya, then the Ra will always be light. If the Ra is sakina, we look at the previous letter. If the letter before that is also sakina, then we look at the haraka on the letter before that. We mentioned if it is fatha or dhamma, then it will be heavy, and if it is kasra, it is light, except for these 2 words, al-qitr and misr. In these instances, you can read them as heavy or light. We can say al-qitr or al-qitr. Likewise, we can say misr or misr. And when I recited Surah Al-Fajr in the previous example, I said وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرِ. This is because we have some exceptional cases such as yasr there, and also fa'asr and وَنُذُرْ. In really exceptional cases such as وَنُذُرْ, fa'asr and yasr, it's best just to learn them on an individual basis. Perhaps now you may see why some students regard the rules of Ra as more difficult. But now after we finish this video, I'm sure you can see, in truth, the rules of Ra are actually rather straightforward. It's only through practice that you will perfect it. So the general rule is that whenever a Ra has a Fatha or a Dhamma, it's full. Whenever it has a Kasra, it's light. Okay, that's clear cut. And whenever it is Sakina, we look at the letter before. If the letter before has Fatha or Dhamma, then it is full. If the letter before has Kasra, then the Ra will be light. And then we mentioned there are certain exceptions to this, such as whenever Ra is Sakina and it has Hamzatul Wasl before it, or whenever Ra is Sakina and it has a Ya before it. We mentioned as well that there are 5 exceptions, such as La bil mil sad, mil sada, filqah, qiltas, and wa il sada. That's because after the Ra there is a full mouth letter in the same word. So in this instance the Ra is also heavy. And we mentioned that if Ra is Sakina, then we look at the letter before. But if the letter before is also Sakina, then we look at the letter before that. And if that is Fatha or Dhamma, then it is heavy, and if it is Kasra, it's light, except for certain few words such as Al-Qitr and Misr and Wa Nudhur, Fa Asli and Yasr. Once you know the main rules, to learn exceptional rules is a lot easier. When you know the main rules, then you can do your reading and everything is fine and fantastic. And then as you come across an exception, you just learn the exception and you cross it when you cross that bridge when you come to it. But that brings us to the end of this lesson. Inshallah, you've taken benefit from it. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and to share this video with your friends and family and peers and whatnot, so we can all share in the rewards. But that's it from me. Take care, and I'll see you on the other side, inshallah. Ma'as salama.